Hi everyone. This week we're going to talk about NKBA graphic standards. This is important because your design project has to be documented using technical drawings. It's not enough just to have all that design information in your head. You have to communicate it. And we need to use technical drawings to capture all of those details that allow a project to be permitted and built. Now, for this class, I am assuming that you have had a basic drafting course and you're familiar with the AIA standards. These are used across the architecture and interior design industry, but kitchen and bath plays a little bit differently. All right, there's a slightly different set of graphic standards used by the NKBA, and that's what we're going to be studying here. Now, those of you who have seen my videos before know that I usually spend a couple hours after recording doing a whole lot of editing, chopping it up into separate videos, cutting out all of my mistakes, and posting individual videos to YouTube and then to your modules. But I don't have time for that today. I do apologize. So you're getting the rough cut today if you're seeing this with this disclaimer still in it. So please pick and choose the parts of this video, the parts of this lecture that you need. And so on the screen you see kind of it laid out for my Kenyatta College students. Interior Design 272, we cover the title block and title page. We look at the floor plan, including those specifications, and the interior elevations. All right. If you are in the 357 class, we also cover the title block and the floor plans, but add in the mechanical plan, including the legends, and we don't touch the interior elevations. And then finally, in the spring, in the 276 class, we continue and look at the construction plan, the mechanical plan, again, including those legends, and also perspective drawings. So let's get back to the lecture. There are some major differences between those AIA and NKBA graphic standards, and I've got them laid out for you here. Let's look first at the scale of your drawings. AIA draws plans and elevations at 1/4 inch scale. NKBA is typically doing smaller, more detailed projects, and so those plans and elevations are drawn at a larger scale, 1/2 inch equals a foot. Right? Because those projects are smaller, they typically can use a smaller sheet size, even though they are drawn bigger, all right, with a larger scale. So the NKBA will typically use an 11 by 17 sheet size. If you need to bump that up to 18 by 24, that's fine. All right. AIA typically uses a much larger sheet. 24 by 36 is pretty common. Okay. There are some different line types used for the cabinetry. You may be familiar with drawing countertops as a solid line, not drawing the base cabinets underneath those countertops, and using a dashed line for the upper cabs. All right. And that's because AIA uses about a 4-foot cut line for their drawings. NKBA does this a little bit differently. The countertops are still a solid line, all right, but we do indicate the base cabinets underneath. That uses a dashed line. Right? And they use the upper cabinets above with a solid line and not dashed. The dimensions are also different between the two standards. AIA dimensions are given in feet and inches, for example, 3 feet 0 inches. NKBA gives dimensions all in inches. That would be 36 inches, not 3 feet 0 inches. Also talking about the dimensions, AIA will dimension exterior walls to the exterior face of structure, right, face of stud perhaps, and the interior walls to the center line of structure. NKBA is interested in the finished face only, so all walls are dimensioned to the interior finished face. Finally, doors and windows are dimensioned differently. AIA dimensions to their center line, NKBA dimensions to the casing, and I'll go into more detail about that when we look at the floor plan. The best example drawings that I've been able to find online are on the Chief Architect website. The link is here. It's also in your module. Please go check those out. And in this lecture set, I'm going to be using the small kitchen file. So go ahead and take a minute now to download that. A typical NKBA set of drawings includes a title page, floor plan, construction plan, mechanical plan, and interior elevations. Other drawings that might be included, but maybe not in all projects, include some details, cross sections, a perspective view, a countertop plan, soffit plan, reflected ceiling plan. All of these are options, right? Schedules are typically on the drawing sheets. Specifications would be a separate set of documents that are added to your drawing sets. We typically, in our student work, do not provide that separate set of specifications. And there also might be a written design statement. When you set up your technical drawing sheets, you need to start with a title block. Standard NKBA sheets, 11 by 17, landscape format, not portrait, landscape, all right, with the title block along the bottom. Put a border line on your sheets. It's about 1/4 inch from the edge of the page, and then that title block is about 3/4 of an inch high. You need a title block on all your technical drawings. You don't need it for the title page because you can provide that project information in different ways. We're about to see some examples. All right. You also don't need it for the mood board because the mood board is typically more of a design document than a technical drawing. So you're able to leave that off if you want to. Now, if your plan does not fit on 11 by 17 at 1/2 inch equals 1 foot scale, all right, bump up to the next size of page. That would be 18 by 24. Don't switch to the smaller scale. Don't go down to 1/4 inch equals a foot just to fit on the page. You have to use that larger scale. If you do use an 18 by 24 or anything larger, right, the title block typically goes along the right-hand side and not along the bottom. The difference is how these sets are bound. 11 by 17 is typically just stapled in a corner, whereas anything larger is bound along one side, and therefore it's easier to read a title block along the side. I've also included here in your set the enlarged title block piece so that you can have this text. For student work, our program is NKBA affiliated, and you have probably, hopefully, signed up for a free NKBA student membership. And so you are allowed to use the NKBA logo on your drawings for our program. All right, so go ahead and do that. You can download that from your module. Also, if this extra step is a problem for my class, you are welcome to use just a piece of text that says NKBA. It doesn't bother me either way. So this example set that we're about to look through uses one of Chief Architect's standard title blocks instead of that NKBA standard, and this is also acceptable. Let's move on to talking about the title page. The title page is going to be kind of like the cover page or cover sheet for your set of drawings, and it needs a lot of project information. Client, building name, All right, location, designer's name, their firm, maybe their contact info. It needs a key to kind of the symbols and legends that are used, and it includes a sheet index for the drawing set. An illustration is optional. A title block is optional if you include all of that information in some other formats. Now, for student projects, we typically don't have some of this information. We don't have that key to the symbols. We may not have a whole lot of information about the client's location, etc. And so we commonly place the design statement on this page because there's room and it makes sense. We've got a couple of examples of the title page, and I don't love these examples. So let's take a look at this one here for the small kitchen. It does give the project name and the client's information. I'm sorry, the designer information, but it doesn't give a sheet index, and that's important. Here's another example from the Kitchen and Bath Design Presentation textbook, and it's got the sheet index and it's got a perspective drawing. I would argue that the perspective drawing needs to be a lot larger and the sheet index maybe could be smaller text. All right. And then let's take a look at a couple more examples. Here we have a larger sheet size, and so they've used a right-hand title block. And then we've got a sheet index on it. We've got two different formats for that. Those are acceptable. Here's one that gives an illustration and just the title of the project. There's no sheet index and there's no designer information on here. This one up here, I think, is your best example of what I'm looking for in a student project. All right, it includes the title block, which is useful. It's got all that information about the project and about the designer. You can just keep that. Okay, it's got a project title. It's got a table of contents, it's got an illustration, and it's got the design statement. All right, and you can format those in whatever order or layout that you like. All right, in this video, you've just been introduced to the NKBA graphic standards, how they differ from the AIA standards. We looked at the title block and the title page. Thanks, everyone. Let's look at the NKBA graphic standards for floor plans. Here you have the example on your screen. This is from Chief Architect's small kitchen example. And the first thing I want you to see is that on the page we have the floor plan and the specifications. So let's look at the drawing of the floor plan first. What is on a floor plan? We have walls, doors, and windows. That's really important. We have cabinets, countertops, fixtures, and appliances. All right. You can show furniture if it's included in the project, and many people choose to do so. It's not 100% required. Okay. What else is on the floor plan? We want to label those major fixtures and appliances just with a small nickname or a small label. This is for quick reference because there's a lot of boxes, things that look like just rectangles on a kitchen plan, and it's great to be able to really quickly tell what that is. And so here's an example right here. It says REF period for refrigerator. Another thing that's important for NKBA plans versus AIA plans is that the casing or the trim is drawn on all your doors and windows if that trim is provided. So here's an example here, this tiny rectangle, that is the trim on this door. What else is included on the NKBA style floor plan? We're going to see symbols, and here is an example right here. We have some elevation symbols that tell us to go look for elevation A for that interior elevation. we have a suggestion of flooring materials. Now, this one's a little odd for those of you coming from the AIA drafting standards. We don't want you to completely tile the floor with a hatch showing the flooring because it gets really busy and starts to be confusing. Instead, when you're close to done drafting, find an area on your floor plan that is less crowded, shall we say, and in that area, show us kind of a suggestion of that flooring. And the whole point here is to show the direction and how it should be installed. All right. Now, missing on this set, that flooring should be listed in the specification, and then go ahead and tag that specification right where your hatch is. Okay. You are also on this floor plan going to include the ceiling heights and room names of any room shown in your drawing. So if there's more than one, if there's like a kitchen and a dining room, show them both. All right. This example is missing the room name, but it does show the ceiling. And notice that it is measured in inches, as in everything, as everything is, excuse me, in NKBA. So for visibility and for legibility, you want any symbol shown on your plan to be the kind of the same size, same graphics as is in your legends. This is just a standard across all drawings. And you also want any text to be a minimum of 1/8 inch high. Right, don't go any smaller than that. Think about people trying to read this in low light conditions with my older eyes. All right, and be generous to us with your text sizes. All right, let's shift to the right-hand side of the page now and look at the specifications. And notice the title here. This is a standard for NKBA drawings. It says Floor Plan Specifications. All right. And think of this like a shopping list of all of the different items for your projects, all right? And they're just listed out in text and they're tagged to the plan. I see a lot of students struggle with this NKBA, this specifications list is formatted a little bit differently than you may have seen in earlier interior design courses. It's a little bit more spare or sparse. So what do you need to list? First of all, make sure you include all fixtures, appliances, and finishes. I see students miss some of the finishes. Don't forget, for example, the paints, different types of paints, what's on your ceiling, what's on your floors. Make sure you hit all of these. Notice that in this example, the finishes are completely missing. They did not attempt to include any finish specifications. All right, but they should be in there. And then for everything in your specification list, you need to include a short name so that we know exactly what you're talking about. A manufacturer, a model name and model number, depending on what that manufacturer has available, and then any other information that could be required to successfully order that product. All right, so let's take a look at an example. Let's look at number 19. First, they have a short name so that we know what we're talking about. Panel front dishwasher. All right, looking at number 2, it just says sink. All right, so a short name so that before anybody looks up any information, they know kind of what they're looking at. Next, we look at the manufacturer. That's this brand ABC. All right. Next, we see the model number. This one says model 123. And then if there was any other information that needed to be included, we would put that there. That's it. All right, it's very pared down set of specifications. Okay. Notice the finished specifications are missing. I already said that. Sorry about that. When you have general room finishes, things that are going to be placed in multiple locations, go ahead and list them in the list and then tag once somewhere convenient on the plan. You don't have to tag like every wall with a paint specification. All right. For cabinets specifically, um, in student work, what I'm expecting is a descriptive specification. And so I want you to describe the style and the materials of your cabinets, and you'll include you'll include some informational. No, that's not what it is. What's the word? Inspirational. Let's start this overall over again. For cabinets specifically for student projects, I'm looking for a descriptive specification. I'm not necessarily looking for you to go to the extra step of finding a manufacturer and a model number for your cabinets. Instead, I want you to tell us about the design, the style, the material of your cabinets. Is it framed or frameless or insets? Is it shaker? Is it something else? Is it a white finish? Is it a natural wood finish? Tell us all those details, all right? And you'll include some inspirational images in your mood board, all right? But for a real project, you would then go work with a cabinet showroom, with cabinet manufacturer to fully select that specification. And I'm not looking for that level of detail in a student project. What I am looking for is the nomenclature. All right, NKBA graphic standards include cabinet nomenclature, and it's typically just written on the plan. You'll remember that cabinet nomenclature is like a nickname for that particular cabinet. And here's an example right here, 1DB18. Remember that is a one drawer base cabinet, 18 inches wide. All right. And so that is just written straight on the plan, 1DB18. Right, and you can see that as we kind of look around on this plan, several of them have that nomenclature right on there. Okay. Now, if there is more detail than you can write in the nomenclature, go ahead and tag that. Notice number 3 right here, and list it in the specifications. So we already know that it's 1DB18. You put the number 3 here, and it says it's a pull-out double trash. Okay. There is an alternate. If you do not want to place the nomenclature on the page, you are going to tag every cabinet and then pull out all that nomenclature into a separate schedule, a cabinet schedule. That's acceptable as well. All right. Do one or the other. Don't do both, though. All right, so far we've talked about what's shown on the floor plan and what's in that floor plan specifications list. Let's move on to dimensions. NKBA uses a different dimension style than AIA, and this is where most students struggle. So let's look at this in great detail. First of all, AIA, no, NKBA. Let's try this again. First of all, NKBA dimensions are drawn to the outside of the room wherever possible. We are typically only including one room in our project, right? Just a kitchen. And so we have more room to the outside of this very complex and crowded plan. Let's pull those dimensions out. All right. Islands and sometimes peninsulas are typically dimensioned inside the room because they're kind of hovering in the middle. It doesn't make sense to pull those dimensions out to the outside. And the tricky part about them is that they need to be dimensioned in two directions. I like to think about this as like Cartesian coordinates. You need to specify both the x direction and the y direction of the island in the room. And so you can see that this island right here has dimensions going this way. All right. And then it's got another string of dimensions going this way to fully specify the location of that island in the room. In NKBA graphic standards, every wall that has cabinets or appliances or really anything, right, is going to have 3 lines of dimensions. 1, 2, 3. The first dimension line is the one that's closest to the wall. In this case, it's it's this one right here. And we are dimensioning usable wall space. You're going to start your dimension from the interior wall face, right? And then you're going to dimension to any casings, openings, or change in wall surface. This includes if there's like a jog in the wall, all right, which is not shown here. So what we do see, we're starting here at the interior wall facing, interior wall face, excuse me. And then if you can't tell, this is like an opening in the wall under some upper cabinets. So it's like a pass through. And so we're going to dimension all the way to that casing and then to the interior face of this wall. Notice we're not measuring over here to the exterior face, we're measuring to this interior face. Also notice we didn't dimension to this cabinet that's in here. We are just talking about this piece of wall. All right. Dimension line number 2, here we go. The second line of dimension is for center lines of all appliances and fixtures. So again, we start at the interior wall face, and then we measure to the center line of this dishwasher, to the center line of the sink, and then there's no more appliances or fixtures, so we're going to go all the way over to the interior face of this wall. Okay. Now, I do suggest, I recommend, and it's shown here in this drawing, that once you place this center line dimension, which typically, whether you're using Chief or AutoCAD, you kind of snap to the back of whatever piece this is, you go ahead and grab that line and you pull it down to the center of your elements. This makes it way easier to read and to tell exactly what is being dimensioned. And you can see that again here with this one. Notice that your center line measurement is using a center line type, and it's got the center line symbol. Our third line of dimensions right here, number 3, this is going to be the overall dimension of your wall. And so we're taking it all the way from the interior face to the other interior face. All right, and we've just gone through all of those NKBA graphic standards for the floor plan. Thank you. Let's talk about the NKBA graphic standards for a construction plan. All right. A construction plan is a drawing showing the changes of construction. This will be kind of the only place in your set where you see what was existing and is now being changed. So you can kind of think of it as the existing demo plan plus new walls, doors, and windows. So what do we show on this plan? We show anything that's existing to remain. We show anything that is existing to be removed or demolished, and we show new construction. Notice we're not showing any cabinets, countertops, fixtures, appliances, furniture. All right, we are just showing walls, doors, and windows in this set. The construction legend also has, let's try that again. The construction plan sheet also has a construction legend, and this typically shows and describes all of the different wall types and those symbols used on the plan. Here are the typical NKBA standards, and I am expecting you to use these specific standards. Your existing wall to remain is typically drawn as a simple wall outline. Right? Your existing wall to be removed, this is demolished, right, is a dashed line type. For new construction, we've got a couple of different symbols for the various wall types. And so we've got an existing opening to be closed. This is an unusual one that you won't see in AIA graphic standards, NKBA only, right? It's got these set of parallel lines, and you can see that right here where there was a window, but now we're doing some infill. Right? The new wall to be added, and there's only a tiny one right here in this example, shows the wall studs. All right, so graphically we're showing wall studs in this new type. Right? There is a new opening to be added. This is again specific to NKBA standards. It's got kind of a diamond shape pattern, and this is when you have an existing wall but you're cutting a new window. All right. There's also a symbol here for blocking for wall cabinets or for anything else, and it is kind of a rectangle the length of whatever it is that you need, and it's got an X in it. All right. So you will give more detail about some of these pieces. For example, new wall to be added. You might have several different wall types in your project. Maybe you've got an acoustic wall. Maybe you've got a wall with extended furring for that you need for plumbing, excuse me. Maybe you've got a 2x4 wall, a 2x6 wall. There could be multiple wall types. They would be listed and described here. You could also provide construction details that would be on a separate sheet but would be tagged here. All right, none of that is shown on this example. All right, that would be an extra level of information for your drawing. Doors and windows. These are all shown on the construction plan. We're going to show existing doors and windows with a solid line type. All right. We're going to show existing to be removed or demolished doors or windows with a dashed line type. If you're going to fill an existing opening, I've already showed you that specific hatch pattern. And then for new construction, new doors or windows, this is the place in the NKBA set where you select and specify any new doors and windows. It's not shown in this set. It would be listed down here. You could write the specification directly on the plan, or more typically, you would provide a legend or a door or window schedule. All right, this is where you are going to specify those doors or windows. Let's talk about dimensions specifically for the construction plan. Every wall is going to have 3 lines of dimensions. That should be familiar to you from the floor plan, but they are slightly different. All right. Your first dimension line is the one closest to the wall, and it indicates usable wall space. You're going to dimension from the interior wall face to any casings or openings, all right, and any change in wall surface. So that should be very familiar to you from the floor plan. The second one is different. Here is our second dimension line. And it's going to indicate the center points of all doors and windows. If you are familiar with AIA graphic standards, which I'm assuming you are, AIA measures to the center line of doors and windows. This right here on the construction plan is where NKBA gives that same type of measurement. The difference is we're measuring from the interior wall face. So the example set of small kitchen has some errors in this area. All right. It is not showing the door and window specifications, so I've given you an example of what that could look like. It doesn't show the new window for some reason, and it 100% should. This is an error in the set, so I've drawn that in for you. All right. And it's also not showing that center line dimension to the doors and windows, which it absolutely should, according to the NKBA graphic standards. So I've added that information for you. All right. I forgot to also mention there is a third dimension line. This is the overall dimension of the wall. All right, everyone. In this video, we just took a look at the NKBA graphic standards for the construction plan. Thanks. Let's look at NKBA graphic standards for the mechanical plan. The mechanical plan is where NKBA shows all of the electrical, lighting, and mechanical information, which is plumbing and HVAC. All right. If you are involved in larger projects, you might pull those sets of information onto different sheets. NKBA is typically working with a very small project, and therefore they put all of this information all on one sheet. So what do we show on this mechanical plan, all right, that I've kind of highlighted here? You're going to show walls, doors, and windows. You also show the cabinets, the countertops, the fixtures, and appliances. You're going to show, like I mentioned, all electrical, lighting, plumbing, and HVAC. You also show any ceiling items. They should be dashed, like this example here, in order to coordinate location with lighting. Now, if you have a complicated ceiling, you might do a separate reflected ceiling plan, and that would be totally fine. But if you don't have that, you want to include it here. All right. Things that we don't include, you don't include that cabinet nomenclature, which is nice because it takes a layer of information off of this very crowded plan. All right. But we do label your major and fixtures and appliances, just like we saw on the floor plan. For quick reference, this one says refrigerator. All right, so keep those on the plan. Let's look towards the right-hand side of this page here and look at the mechanical legend. And yes, it is labeled mechanical legend. All right. This is a list, and it should include all symbols used on the plan. So if you've got a symbol over here, it has to be on or in the legend. All right. And it would be best if those symbols are at the same size or scale as on the plan. All right, so if it looks like this over here, it should look like it over there. The mechanical legend includes specifications for lighting and other mechanical equipment, which is typically perhaps some vents or some heating or some ventilation, bathroom vent, excuse me. Let's try that one again. Your mechanical legend is going to include specifications for lighting and other equipment. That other equipment might be some heating equipment if it's included in your project, or ventilation. For a bathroom, it's typically the bathroom vent fan. All right. And similar to what we saw in the floor plan specifications list, you're going to list a short name for the item. All right, then the manufacturer, model number, and all ordering information. So let's take a look over here. We've got this symbol, which is the same, same size, same symbol as is used in the plan. It says 4-inch recessed LED lights. That's the nickname or short name for this item. We've got brand ABC. It's the manufacturer, and then we've got model 123. And if there was any other information needed to successfully order this item, you would include it right here. All right. Now, for the electrical, you also include electrical switches and receptacles. Receptacles, by the way, that's the fancy name for electrical outlets. And for student projects, we're going to use a descriptive specification. I don't need you to go pick a specific manufacturer or model number for your switches and outlets. You can if you want to go to that extra step, that's great, but you don't have to. So an example would be a GFCI outlet, and you could just list it like that. Or a three-way switch with dimmer. You could just list it like that. You don't have to go on and tell us that it's a Lutron model number or whatever. All right. So that's listed over here. All right. And there's one more piece of information that is needed on this plan. We need to know the height of switches and receptacles. And that's typically done with a note. And here's an example here. It says, all switches and receptacles 48 inches above finished floor unless otherwise noted. This is kind of a typical note, says all of them are that height unless they're noted. So then you go through your drawing and find anything that's not at that height and put the height on the plan. And so here's an example right here. This outlet is at 37 inches above the finished floor, not 48. And so we need to note that. The other way to do it, if you've got outlets and switches at various heights and it doesn't make sense to use this typical note, is simply to tag every outlet and switch with their height. Next, let's talk about those dedicated outlets for your appliances. The fixtures and appliances themselves are specified on the floor plan, so we don't need to repeat that information here on the mechanical legend. So in the example that we're seeing here, the range and the hood themselves are specified on the floor plan. All right. What are we specifying on the mechanical plan? Well, we're looking at the utilities to service these fixtures and appliances. And so here's an example, something that I think is incorrect in your sample set, and here's a better way. We're going to show for this vent hood, we're going to show the dedicated outlets, all right, and we're not going to list the actual specification of that vent hood. That information's already in the set. We don't need to repeat it. All right. So instead, you could use language such as dedicated outlet for vent hood, 120 volts. All right. And the symbol, NKBA's symbol for dedicated outlet is this little triangle within a circle, all right, with a text tag that is specific to the item that we are servicing. While I'm here and looking at this text tag, I'd like to remind you to use a minimum of 1/8 inch high text. Sometimes these little tags can get really small. Make sure they're big enough to read. All right, let's talk about dimensions specifically for mechanical plans. We are going to use a center line dimension for all light fixtures and equipment. All right, those all get a center line. For wall-mounted lighting and equipment, this is pretty easy. The centerline dimension goes along the wall. And so we've got an example. Is there an example in this set? No, that's why I didn't tag it. All right. For anything that's kind of floating in the room, we need to centerline dimension it, but they get two. They get centerline dimensions in two directions, measured from the walls. And I like to think about this very much like I just mentioned with the islands in the floor plan. I like to think about this as kind of a Cartesian coordinate. We need to locate that piece of equipment kind of in the X and Y direction. And sorry, let me go ahead and start this over again. And very similar to, like I mentioned, with islands in the floor plan, I like to think about these dimensions as a Cartesian coordinate system with the X direction and the Y direction. So we need to locate that piece of equipment, this little light, all right, kind of in the X direction and the Y direction. That's why it needs two dimensions. Okay, so here's an example right here. All right, notice it's dimensioned from the wall to here. And here is our other dimension in the other direction, dimensioned from the wall to that item. Now, LED strip lighting is a special case. It's not typically dimensioned. And so it's shown with respect to its location on the plan. And you might choose to include a note about its installation. So if you want it to be installed 1 inch back from the front edge of the upper cabinet or something like that, go ahead and note it right here in the legend. Now, notice we've been talking about light fixtures and equipment. You don't need to dimension switches or receptacles. They don't get dimensions at all. And the reason for this is that they are typically placed in the field based on where the framing is in the wall behind. And so that is adjusted and decided upon in the field, and we don't dimension that. So notice this switch, no dimension at all. Let's move on to talk about lighting circuits. Lights are connected to their controls, their switches, using circuit arcs. And here we have an example here. Here's a switch and a circuit arc connecting, here, here, here. And in this case, because it is a three-way switch, we've got a connection to the other switch over here. Okay. Now, NKBA graphic standards specify a solid line type for the circuit arcs. AIA uses dashed lines. Chief Architect specifically will default to dashed lines unless you go change that. This example set is showing dashed lines. In my class, I will accept either, right? But just know that submitting to, for example, the, let me try that again. In my class, I will accept either solid or dashed. If you're submitting to that national competition, you should probably go with the NKBA graphic standards of solid lines. There is a lot to know about how to draw these lighting circuits. So let's point out some common errors. First of all, the circuit arcs, we're talking about the curved line, right? They need to connect to the end point of switch symbols. So here is a mistake right here. It's just kind of floating next to that switch. Instead, I want this line to connect right here to this point. Number two, circuit arcs should never cross a wall. All right, so we've got one right here. Go around instead. Don't ever cross a wall. And just as we're looking at number two, this we shouldn't connect to the back edge of the switch symbol, right? You should definitely connect right here to this point. Error number three, this is really common in especially kitchen plans. Don't allow your circuit arcs to touch any symbol that the circuit doesn't control. All right, so I said no right here. Um, what this indicates, if you have a switch and it touches the outlet, it means that that switch controls the outlet. That's a switched outlet. All right, so don't say that if you don't mean it. Number 4, try not to allow circuit arcs to cross. The goal is legibility. We should be able to really quickly and easily tell which lights connect to which controls. So I've got an example here. This is honestly, this is not too bad because it's pretty easy to tell how these cross. In some other examples, it's very difficult, but typically we don't want them to cross. All right. If you have to have them cross because your plan is complicated and sometimes there's just no way to draw it without crossing your circuit arcs, you should use what I call a hop symbol. So in this case, I've said yes right here. We've got this circuit arc, and then we've drawn this one. It comes here, it breaks, and we use a hop. We jump over and then connect. This is a visual indication. It honestly helps your eye follow the correct line, and it's easier to tell which circuit goes to which switch. Finally, check for legibility. Can you actually read all tags, or are they kind of covered up? All right. Are they actually the minimum 1/8 inch text size, or did that get shrunken down? All right. A lot of students struggle with the fact that a bank of switches like this is going to be larger graphically on the page than it is physically in your building. All right. That's accepted, that's known in the industry. You can go ahead and show those as wide as you like, and we understand that they are installed in one place. Thanks everyone. In this video, we just took a look at the NKBA graphic standards for the mechanical plan. Let's look at the NKBA graphic standards for interior elevations. What's an interior elevation? It is a vertical projection of a wall, and we use it in order to show different heights, materials, related information that can't be seen in other drawings. There's a lot of information, especially in kitchens and baths, that you just can't tell by looking at a plan, and so we draw these interior elevations. Your typical NKBA set will include an interior elevation for each and every wall that has pretty much anything installed on it: cabinetry, appliances, fixtures. You're also going to show each side of an island, and let me call your attention to this drawing right here. Here's an example. Notice we're seeing each side of the island. They are aligned so they're like sitting on the same floor basically, and we don't show the walls or anything behind. This is not like a full elevation of what's behind it. It is just focused on the island. Right. The only thing you might choose to do if, for example, you've got pendants over this island or anything hanging, you might include a ceiling line, just a line to indicate where that ceiling height is and show that pendant. That's useful because you can then dimension the height. So let's move back to kind of the more standard interior elevation of a full wall, and we have some examples of it here. Notice that again, if there's multiple drawings on the page, which often happens, you're going to align that floor level. This is a mistake I see all the time in student work. All right, so make sure that they're kind of sitting on the same ground. It makes all your dimensions line up, and it makes it way easier to understand and read these drawings. Another really common mistake I see is interior elevations typically do not show any thickness or structure. We don't see the thickness of the walls. We don't see the construction of the floor or the ceiling. All right, it is just a single line outline, kind of skimming the edges of the walls, the ceiling, and the floor. And that outline should be the heaviest line on the page. It is a very heavy line weight. It's just a border, it's just an outline. Now here's something that is specific to kitchen design that might not be familiar to you. And that is that sometimes we have elements that are perpendicular to the direction of the view. And an example would that be cabinetry on a side wall. And those elements we're going to draw in section. Chief Architect will automatically do this for you. It'll show the interior details of these cabinets in section. All right, I've just put a little yellow highlight on there so you can tell what I'm talking about. All right. Those working in AutoCAD or hand drafting, you can choose to use a heavy profile line. This would be a very heavy line that would just kind of indicate those items in section. This is also acceptable. Let's look at dimensions for the NKBA interior elevations. Um, we were very definitive about what dimensions needed to be placed on a floor plan. The interior elevations, however, are a little more of a gray area, a little bit more of judgment is needed by the designer or the draftsperson. And so in general, you're going to have horizontal dimensions, right? Kind of in your left, right direction. And you're going to have vertical dimensions kind of in the up, down direction. Let's talk about the horizontal ones first. Um, your horizontal dimensions, you're going to kind of divide your elevation in half, and everything that's up here in the upper half of your elevation is going to get dimensions above the elevation. And that's why I've drawn this big green arrow. All right, everything up there. Everything that's kind of in the bottom half gets dimension below. Again, you just get to make a judgment call about what those are. All right. So the horizontal dimensions do get three levels of dimensions very similar to the floor plans, but it's a little bit more detailed. Here is where we finally dimension individual cabinetry pieces. Notice that, right? Between the individual cabinet pieces. That is not shown in the floor plan. Right? We also include on that second line, center lines to appliances and fixtures. Notice that just like on the floor plan, I suggest grabbing that dimension line and pulling it kind of to the center of the item that we're dimensioning it. You can see it right here as well. You can see it here. It is far easier to read. It's more clear than if your dimension just kind of stopped out here. We can tell what is dimensioned easier. Right? And your overall dimension is that third line. Notice if there's not enough information that you don't need those 1, 2, 3 lines, you just don't use it. So up here, we didn't have anything to center line, so we just left that one out. Here's another choice you can make. Notice we've got this 113 and 7/8 dimension up and down. In my opinion, that's kind of overkill. There's no real reason to have both of those. So you could leave one out if you like. Let's take a look at the vertical dimensions. Vertical. Again, there is a judgment call here. Anything that's kind of on the left-hand side of your interior elevation, you dimension over here. Anything that's kind of on the right, you dimension over here. Sometimes interior elevations will also have a line of vertical dimensions kind of in the middle. If it just wasn't clear enough, if you pulled them all the way out, some of the larger interior elevations will need a set of vertical dimensions in the middle. Right. And then what kind of interior dimensions let me try that again. And then what kind of vertical dimensions do you need? Again, it's a little bit up to the designer. Your intent is to clearly communicate all of these vertical elements. And so you need a lot of dimensions. Here's a couple of examples. On this dimension here, we've shown the toe kick and then the cabinet height. We've shown the countertop thickness. We've shown the dimension to the upper cabinets. And then because they extend all the way to the ceiling, we've got that. And then we've got an overall dimension. Looking over here to the right, notice for some reason they have left off that toe kick dimension. I think that's an error, and you probably need that information. Right. You've also missing a couple of important pieces of information that I really think should be in this set, and that is the heights, the installation heights of this vent hood. Right? Absolutely, that needs a dimension and it's missing. So you would go ahead and pull that one all the way out here. You might do a separate line of vertical dimensions for it. That's important. Thank you, everyone. In this video, we just took a look at the NKBA graphic standards for interior elevations.